Hello, friends. We are so grateful to have Warren Williams here today. And Warren, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your insights and what you're going to be able to share.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
And we met, I don't know if you remember, but we met several years ago at a conference for Lost Fatherhood. It was a conference in California where I met you.
In San Francisco, probably.
Oh, yeah, in San Francisco. Yeah, that's right. And you know, so many times we hear about the harm that abortion causes women. And, you know, and I'm sorry for that because I have heard so many men say, well, what about us? We have been harmed too, which we'll talk about a little bit later in our segment. But you've had an experience with abortion, not personally, but you have witnessed been a witness to abortion. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Before my wife and I were married, we were college kids, and we were kind of on the wrong side of the issue here. We were trying to help, as we thought we were doing, trying to help women with unplanned pregnancies. And when they got pregnant, we were the ones to go to if you wanted to get an abortion. So we would set it up so that they could actually get an abortion, and at the time they couldn't get one in many of the states. So Tijuana was our go-to. So we would arrange for enough money for them to take a bus to Tijuana, had the doctor set up there, and the abortion would be done. And so we were thinking we were really helping people. And then one of Yvonne's friends, my wife's friends, came back from an abortion in Tijuana, and she was devastated. She was a shell of the woman that she had been, and she just didn't have any fun in her life anymore, and she was very, very sad all the time. It really was a moral it was more than a moral injury to her. It was moral devastation. She really didn't want to do this, and we talked her into it. We got her there, and she got the abortion, came back, and she was very deeply morally injured. Well, that put us in a position of being in a place where we were secondarily morally injured, because we thought we were doing the right thing. So if one believes that they're doing the right thing, and then it turns out badly, there's a range of moral injury that occurs to that person as well. So that was what happened to us.
So you saw, just to clarify, so you saw the pain that abortion caused her, and so as a dear loving friend, as I understand, you know, she was a dear friend of your wife and you, that you felt sorrow that you had convinced her basically, or, you know, and provided all the transportation and you know, setting all that up for the abortion. So can you kind of explain her, like, before she went in for the abortion and like some of the things she was saying that you were talking her maybe into having the abortion?
Yeah, I think that she had a strong moral conviction that if she did that, it was going to be doing something very wrong. And so we had conversations over coffee and just, you know, on campus and talked to her about what was going on in her life and how it would affect her, how it would affect her parents, how it would affect her future if she continued on with the pregnancy. And she was really challenged and conflicted because the way that the pregnancy happened was on a date rape to begin with.
Oh dear.
So she already had moral injury from that. But then we were trying to solve that the best way we knew how, and kept bringing it up to her. And finally, she just acquiesced and said, "Yeah, I think I should go do this, and then I can get on with my life, and we'll just think that this never happened." Well,
so there was trauma. There was trauma from the rape.
Yeah.
And then there was possibly trauma from the abortion as well, which, you know, I have had clients before say that it's actually like a double traumatization.
Yeah.
That was compounding because she morally felt like it was wrong, but went ahead and did it anyway because, you know, maybe of the fear of, you know, the reminder of if she would have parented the child, that child would be a constant reminder of the rape. And so it is very, abortion can be very complicated. And you, like so many other people, Warren, do feel like they're helping. And what I have understood, just growing up and really taking this issue to heart, when we make that abortion decision or when we think we're helping people, it's all based on fear of the future, fear of your career, fear of, just so many things. You fill in the blanks. So, and I pray for your friend. I hope she has sought out healing. But what led you? So I know that impacted your life in a very special way, that there was growth for you that came out of that. Can you tell me what happened after that?
Well, shortly after that, both my wife and I received the Lord's blessing of salvation, and we started looking at life through a different lens. And the lens of salvation makes everything new. It just, there's just no way to explain it any different from that. That we understood what happened to us was not only a moral injury, but was also morally something that could be healed through the love of Christ. So as we understood that, we got involved in starting a pregnancy center in Boulder. And a little bit before that, we were involved in a Right to Life movement, because we realized what we've done and what we were always trying to. She and I have always been in the caregiving mode all of our life. So we're trying to fix this and then fix that. So we got into Right to Life. And Right to Life, we could quickly see, was a very political organization. And it was a lot of talk, but nobody was getting any help. It was thinking about how you could position people on the chessboard to get the right moves so that things would change. But it wasn't going to be really a much help individually to the people who were hurting from the abortion experience. And we were still reeling from the process that we'd gone through with her friend. So we started a pregnancy center. A few years into the pregnancy center, we were having some women coming back to the pregnancy center and saying that they really felt the pain of abortion. And so we decided to expand that into some counseling, or at least trying to do some counseling with them. And we had a seminar where we had a psychologist come in and give the seminar. Turns out the janitor in the place where we were doing the seminar, the janitor was trapped in the back room, and there were like 11 women in the other room listening to the seminar. And he was so embarrassed to go through the room that he just fell in a puddle in the back and kind of was into his own world, and he had paid for an abortion. So it got him right in the heart. And there he was. There's nothing he could say, nothing he could do. The deed was done. It's permanent. There's no fixing it. Men like to fix things. No fixing this. So he is in the back room, just sobbing. And I found him after the seminar was over. I was putting things away, and there he is. And I said, "What's wrong?" So he said, "I don't know what's going on with the women, but there's got to be a way that you can help men." That was the start of it. That was where I got drafted into. God drafted me into his army to help men deal with the loss that they feel with their lost fatherhood, with the loss of a child, with the loss most of the time of the relationship, many other losses. There's moral ambiguity with the parents and with other people because it's a secret, and culturally we've never graduated from the idea that this is something that's taboo to even talk about if you're a man. So there he was. Well, we started trying to figure out how to work with this. All we knew was just to pray, which is good anytime. And we started noticing that there were some things being written about it. Vince Rue had put out an article about the post-abortion stress, and had given us some ideas that this was a little bit like, not exactly, but a little bit like the post-traumatic syndrome that people were experiencing that had been in a war situation. So that's how I kind of got started in working with men to help them recover from and to reclaim their fatherhood.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's wonderful. It's a wonderful ministry too. You know, one thing that strikes me is I want to apologize to the men that women didn't give you the opportunity to have your say. I know when I was pregnant at 17, I just didn't see any way out. And I thought I knew that I needed to get an abortion, and I did not let my boyfriend have any say. In fact, that's when I took control and I said, no, we're going to, I have to do this. I've since asked for forgiveness, but, the father is helpless in this situation. And we're going to have more talk later in our interviews from other men, and even, a person that has dealt with men with trauma from abortion. But it is a real, it's a real thing. And men, if you have had an abortion experience, we ask that, that you do seek help, because, it's not something that without help that maybe that you can recover from. And you might not even understand that the abortion may be the result of what's happened in your life.
Yeah.
So Warren, you have a Bible study, Missing Arrows. And can you tell us a little bit about that? So you work with men as, helping to reclaim their fatherhood. So what do you see in men, and how do you help men with some of the issues that they're challenged with?
Well, starting with the basic fabric of a man's psyche, there is the desire for him to protect and to provide and to be and to pass on a lineage. So those things are kind of deep-seated within just being a man. It's just standard issue. That's what you come with when you're born. So as you grow as a boy and you grow into a manhood, those are the things that happen. Well, abortion cuts all of that off. It is irretrievable for you to be able to provide and protect and to pass the lineage on, or even to be perform as a father with the boy as he's growing up. So all of that is kind of missing completely with that particular child. Doesn't mean it's missing with other children, but there are affects from that which do happen with other children later on, with trouble with bonding with the other children because of the unresolved grief issues that a man will go through having lost a child by an abortion experience. And there's kind of breaks into two categories which are described beautifully in Scripture. In Proverbs 13, it talks about the man whose heart is sick, who's a heart-sick man because his hope has been deferred. In this case, his hope is totally devastated. But when he gets healing, it's like a spring of life. So and it's in the same sense. I mean, same proverb, Proverbs 13:12, right in there, in those two sentences, describe the man who has lost a child and who was very saddened by losing the child because perhaps he was the person who was trying to save the life and was arguing for and championing for the baby, and was not successful. And because of that, there are some other things that go on too. There's a lot of shame and grief and questioning about God. If this thing really happened, how does my belief in God fit into this whole where does that piece come into my puzzle now? Is God even real? Does he? So there's that man, and then there's the other man who has the idea that he should really press his girlfriend, his mate, for an abortion. And Proverbs 28:17 says that a man who is involved with a murder, he uses the term murder, is involved with the death of another, will be a fugitive. So there's this fugitive lifestyle that occurs with the guy who has taken the position that he needed to stop the birth and needed to stop the baby's life. So he is insisting on forcing and coercing, doing all kinds of things that he can to get his girlfriend, wife, or his lover, any one of those things that happens in his relationship. He's trying to get that stopped. He's trying to stop that life from happening for whatever reason, and there are many reasons that we all know. So then, as Scripture never falls short of being true, he ends up living this lifestyle as a fugitive, running from things, fighting about things, ignoring things, looking at life as though everything is determined quarterly, not having long-range plans, or just getting deep into things that are so encompassing that he has no time for anything else. And these are all indicative of fugitive behavior. But with that fugitive behavior, there's also the healing that Jesus promises in Matthew 5. If a person will go through the grief, they will be healed. They can be. They will be comforted at least, and comfort's pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty good part of healing. So what I noticed that men needed most was to feel that they could redeem the blessing that they once felt by knowing the Lord, by knowing their relationship with God was real, and now having questions about that. So in their moral dilemma, they're trying to figure out, how do I reconcile all of these things, and how will I ever be able to redeem my fatherhood, to get it back? Because there's always that desire, and there are literally millions and millions of men out there who have that desire, and they're not expressing it for several reasons, first being culture. But I noticed that if a man really does want to get the blessing back, I better start looking in Scripture for places where blessing is talked about. And I found this whole list in Matthew 5. And it fits perfectly in a healing track for men to follow. When we start out with the verse that says, when you are poor in spirit, you are a candidate for the kingdom of God. So there are some other translations that say when you're at the end of the rope, when you're at the end of the rope, you're in a place where God can touch you.
Yes,
well,
I've been there. Yes.
Yeah. So there's no retrieving. There's no going back on the loss of the child. So you are bankrupt spiritually at that point with regard to that phase of your life. So what's next? Well, the kingdom of God is next. So then that leads into the second phase, and that is those who grieve will be comforted. Blessed are those who grieve, because they will receive comfort. And that whole track just continues down through meekness and being hungry and thirsty for righteousness and forgiveness, pureness, being a child of God, forgiveness, or being a peacemaker. All of that works out to bring total healing through the spiritual process that has been damaged so badly, that moral injury that has been totaled the guy out. So,
Well, and the moral injury piece, it's even more, moral injury. There is a spiritual component that you bring to
Absolutely.
light about this, that it's just not because you morally think it's wrong, but there's, we call them also soul wounds. Abortion to men is a soul wound that they, the lost fatherhood that they've experienced. And I know that you have said that a lot of men are angry. And, for myself, I was angry for what I had allowed to happen. And as I've helped other men, but they're angry for allowing, not for speaking up, because a lot of times all women need is, we can do this. That's all they're needing. And so many times men, I feel like they're stuck. They don't know what to say. And they're afraid too. I mean, a lot of times we were young and dumb and just, getting pregnant because of the consequences of having premarital sex.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then, like I said before, it was just all fear-based. So, I just want men to also know, just like I discovered, that God's grace is sufficient, and there can be forgiveness and there can be amends making. We need to take our part of the responsibility. And, I hope that, the audience knows that I'm not trying to blame, but it's my part of it, but it's also other contributing factors that played a role in it. And, and those fathers that have daughters, I know that my dad just really loved me. And, when he told me that if I had ever gotten pregnant, that he would kick me out and cut off all ties, I know now that he was doing that to protect me from, like, to scare me, not to ever get myself pregnant. Well, I believed him. And I think that was kind of maybe one of the worst things he could have said to me, because it showed like conditional love, not unconditional love.
Yeah.
We will help you. And so for, the fathers, though, that have lost children, my heart goes out to them. But I'd like you to speak to men about their anger, if you could.
Yeah. What I have found in one-on-one and in group situations is almost 100% of the time, there is a bell curve of anger that these guys are living in. And it can be from a low-grade contempt for everything that's going on to just rage. I'll tell a quick story about the rage. A guy came into pregnancy center in Boulder, and I worked a few blocks away with my real estate practice, and my wife called. She was the director at the time. And she said, there's a guy here who wants us to mail the silent scream, which is a video of an abortion, which is happening. He wanted us to mail that to his counterpart because she had a restraining order on him and couldn't receive mail from him, so she wanted us to mail this out. So Yvonne said, this guy's not going away. I need you to come down and talk to him. So I came down, sure enough, he was raging, he was mad, and he wanted this done. And I said, we've got to go take a walk. I got to talk, we can't do anything with you or for you until we walk this out. Well, he never did walk it out. He just got angrier because we weren't going to do what he wanted to do. So the guy was really suffering deep moral damage from what had happened with the abortion experience. And I don't know what actually happened to him, but that was the kind of pinnacle of the right side of the bell curve with anger. I've had guys.
When you think about it, I mean, to me, I would say that was rage, because if for those, and, we're not saying that everybody's harmed. We're not saying that if you're, like if you have anger issues or like maybe drug addiction, sexual addiction, that those resulted from the abortion. We're not saying that at all. I just kind of want to be clear with that. But when you feel like, when you have a position that you feel like it's a life, that whatever is inside the womb is a life growing, you feel like that is a baby, and you feel like you're the father and you are helpless to save that child, what do you think is going to happen? They would, I mean, it would only be natural to feel rage and helplessness and just wanting to, you know, tear down the walls and say, save my child. So I certainly understand. I understand that plight exactly. So I am so thankful that you have such a ministry to help men process this out, because I'm sure it's not easy for them, is it?
No, it isn't. It isn't easy because there is so much confusion. There's so much guilt. There's shame. There's blame. There's kind of this, what I would call a moral vertigo of where do I go now? I'm kind of just floating out here. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm not sure where to go. So we kind of work through all of that by bringing it all back to truth. What's true about the experience? What's true about your relationship before the experience? What is true about everybody that was involved in it? Is it true that you were 100% responsible for it? No, that's a lie. Is it true that she was 100%? No, that's a lie too. Who was all involved in here? We want to get you true grace for the things that happened to you, because you can get grace for your own stuff, but you can't get grace for somebody else's. So we try to identify, what part of this do you need to feel responsible for? What part of this do you need to understand was, in fact, your own doing? And so you can, because you can get the grace of God from that, for that. You also, we try to figure out, where are you injured? Where are you injured in your soul? Are you also injured spiritually? Are you morally injured with this? Were your expectations with your relationship so different from what it was after the abortion that it's got you confused about future relationships? Where are you in all of this? So we try to find all of the puzzle pieces that have kind of blown up and they're laying around the room, and try to start fitting them back together again so that the guy can move into areas where he needs to find forgiveness and build really a kind of a plan of forgiveness. I have stories about guys that really wanted to find out how she is years later. Does she go through the same thing I went through? Does she feel the same way? I want to find her, and I want to make sure she's okay. It's a male thing. The man wants to do that.
It makes sense, because if, you know, and it's like for me, you know, when I know that, like when they learn that they didn't protect and provide, it would just be natural that when they waken up, and I know a lot of men, like I didn't see the ultrasound at the time of my abortion, but when I saw the ultrasound, that's when my trauma started. And I know from experience that's from men's stories that happens as well. When they see the ultrasound, it's like an awakening. I didn't
absolutely
protect and provide. Yeah, so it sure makes sense that they want to know, you know, how that person is doing.
Yeah, they really, and had a guy show up at his former girlfriend's house. She's married, and he knocks on the door, and she comes, and she's really surprised to see him because she hadn't seen him for years. And he said, "Can I talk to you? I've just been through this process where I feel really healed up from what happened with the abortion." And her husband knew nothing about this. And it was a scene. You can imagine what happened. He ordered the guy off of his property. And so he came back to me, and he said, "Well, all I was doing is trying to figure out if she's okay." I said, "Yeah, well, here's the thing. Let's set this up for you and for other men for the future. You put it into a matter of prayer that God will run her past your life if you are supposed to deal with this, and when you're supposed to deal with it. You don't run past her life. You ask God to bring her through this time with you and bring her into your life again. Then you can have the conversation, because God will know she's ready for that."
Yeah, and you know, that's such a good tip. And that's all in the process of, you know, healing from the abortion. And
Yeah.
I know for myself, I felt like I apologized to my boyfriend years later. And I did it in a way, I felt God calling me to do it. And I did it in a way that I first went to my husband and we talked about how I would do it.
Yeah.
And I notified the parents, and I just said I'd like to get a hold of him, and I gave him my telephone number. And then my boyfriend called me, and that's when I made the amends. And so it just, whether he forgives me or not, I don't have any control of that, but I sure wish he would. And I wish all men, that have been harmed by abortion can understand God's grace, not only for themselves, but for everybody, really, that, like you said, Warren, at the very beginning of this, where we just thought we were helping, when
Yeah.
years later, when we grow up and we're like, that wasn't so helpful, because
Yeah.
so many times, like I said many times, and I know you agree with this, I didn't realize at the time how much later I would love the child I lost to abortion. And that's just so unfortunate that it's years later, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. A lot of times guys they'll say, well, I don't know if God can forgive me. I don't know if I can receive forgiveness from her. I don't know if I can receive forgiveness from God. And so God showed me a way to think about this through the lens of King David when he lost his child. So when he and Bathsheba had their tryst and the child was born, Nathan, of course, came and said, your child's going to die. And David went through, he grieved before the child died, which is a little bit different than grieving after. But the grief process was still the same. He still went through the process of and reaching the point where he was bargaining with God in the grief process and asking God if it was possible for the child's life to be spared. Well, it wasn't. And so the child died. But then when that was done, he went into the acceptance and forgiveness stage of grief. And he accepted that. And he said, okay, I know that, so I'm going to wash my face. I'm putting on clean clothes. God did it. It's over. I know that, and I can move forward. I can have closure now because I know everything Nathan said was true. Well, that's good for the first part. The second part is, did the child forgive him? That's the question. Well, how do we know if the child forgave him? Well, Jesus was talking about some children once with his apostles and his disciples with a crowd of people around. And he said this, there's all these children in heaven and they have their angels around them and they're protecting them. And we know that there is no unforgiveness in heaven. Nobody gets in there with unforgiveness. It all gets settled, whether it's your last breath and you're saying forgiven, or if it's not, it's earlier. You get into heaven because you have been forgiven and because you forgave. So those are things that are true. Well, if the children are in heaven and there's angels all around them, it stands to reason through second stage of logic that they have forgiven you. If they have forgiven you, then you can know that because they are in heaven. There's no unforgiveness, and you're here. They're waiting for you. When you get there, they're going to run up to you and say, Dad. They're going to be happy to see you. So don't worry about that. That's taken care of. God's done that for you, so you don't need to worry about whether or not the children have forgiven you. But it's good. They feel really good to know that that's happened, that they are forgiven by the baby.
Well, and I would even wonder if, in my mind, if the child even has memory,
Yeah.
because heaven is a perfect place.
Yep.
Where no sin dwells. So I would think if they remember, they are inviting that evilness into heaven by remembering that. So I question whether our children even remember that. And
Yeah.
so, that might be something to explore.
I'm going to borrow that from you. I like that.
That's how I see it, because, their conscience left. Jesus has them. We don't see evil, and he will wipe away every tear. And
Yeah.
that's how I've always pictured it. And that my child, and it just doesn't matter because he or she loves me because I'm his mother, I'm her
Right.
mother, and it just doesn't matter. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's good stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
well,
part of the
Warren,
healing process. That's great.
yeah, and it took me a while. So, and then, part of the forgiveness is, when we do these rituals, when we do these processes and we ask forgiveness, we ask, God to forgive us for our sin. But, there's other people we need to ask for forgiveness to, like, for example, my boyfriend. Well, part of the process also is maybe writing your child a letter to express your deep sorrow and your deep grief, because that also helps with the grieving process, to
Yeah,
be
we
able
have.
to make that connection with the child. Because I do believe that our children live on in heaven and we can be connected in that
I
way.
I believe that too, and that's a process that many fathers choose to take, is to write a letter to their baby, and just to, because it's real cathartic to do that, and so they do that. Or we've had other things that we do to have closure and kind of have a memorial service. And National Memorial for the Unborn has walls across the country where you can put a plaque
Right.
of a memory. And so it's a time, date stamp right there on a granite wall. This is my baby's name. This is where I had my last memory, perhaps even had a communion there or something. We've done that. And just had the blessing of having that kind of closure. We've had, do you want to, we had, it's your choice. How do you want to do this? How do you want to memorialize this child for the future? Had people build monuments in the forest. Had a guy that I was working with from the Portland area. You could see Mount Hood from where his window was. He went and climbed halfway up the mountain and built a big monument so he could see it with his binoculars from time to time, just to remember the child. So.
And what that does, as you know, that brings dignity to that child, because it was such an undignified way to die. And because we love our children, we want to bring back that dignity and honor that life, that there was actually a life there. So, and people that, have not been harmed by abortion may not understand all that. And I can appreciate that. But there are a lot of people that need that for closure. So I encourage that type of processing as well.
Yeah.
Well, Warren, it's been so wonderful to have you today. Is there any closing thoughts you would like to end? I know that you have a ministry called, the Bible study is called Missing Arrows, a Bible study about lost fatherhood. And people can contact you, and we will provide that contact information. But do you have any lasting thought that you would like to share with us?
Well, I would just say that it doesn't matter who says you can't be healed and who says you can't have the process of grief and you can't go through this, even if it's your own mind playing tricks on you. You can do this. You can be healed. God is always sending good gifts and perfect gifts from heaven toward you, and he wants you to be healed. And Jesus would not have said that you would be blessed if you grieve if he didn't mean it. So just take that to heart, and don't, get over the idea that you can't do this or that you don't need to do this, and just do it. Or that
you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And because that's what it was for me. I just thought my shame was so great. I'm like, God can't forgive me for this huge sin. And I'll close with this, and I've said it before, but I used to think like my sin was like this big, and that God's grace is only this big, and that he couldn't forgive me that. Like, well, who are you? Who are you to say that I can't forgive you? That's kind of what God said to me. How I felt, in a prayer. Who are you to say I can't forgive you? I forgive you. My grace is sufficient for you.
It is. So. And I remember the Apostle Paul having a discussion with his own self. And he's saying, You know, I know he's in his mind, he's remembering the murders that he committed against the Christians. And here he is a Christian, and he's committed murders in the background. He said, you know what? I'm not even in the realm of being able to judge myself. It's God who has been judged, and he has been judged for me. And therefore, I'm free. And so I have the blessing of freedom because he's already been judged for all of my sin.
That is so wonderful. That is very rich. Thank you very much. All right. Well, we were here with.
To be here.
Oh, well, our pleasure. And Warren, you're such a blessing. And people, if you want to get in contact with Warren, I encourage you to do so. And thanks again, Warren. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.